Hi everybody! Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Catherine D. Graham and I am a Amazon best-selling fantasy author. Today we are going over how to use AutoCrit to self-edit a novel. This is part of my behind the scenes indie author series for 2022. For those who don't know me, I'll keep this really short. I have now released my debut epic fantasy novel, and that was my bestseller last year, The Vow That Twisted Fate. I've been preparing for that release and everything for, gosh, I can't believe it's been like a year. And it came out in July. So I decided to do this series just to share tips and tools that I have found helpful over my first year as an indie author. And I definitely welcome you to share your opinions and your feedback on these tools as we go through. And if you see others that you would like to know more about, those will be available on my channel under the Indie Author Behind the Scenes series. We've already done Klaviyo for email list management, Canva for graphics, and we've got several coming up in February, BookBub and BookFunnel. So a little disclaimer since we're getting started. While all my other Indie Author Behind the Scenes videos are not sponsored in any way, I'm not paid to do these, although I did get permission to do them from the companies and show you their websites behind the scenes. I do work for AutoCrit as a developmental editor. I did not work for AutoCrit when I requested permission to do this video last year because I was a user of AutoCrit. I used it for The Vow That Twisted Fate, which is now my bestseller. And it saved me so much money and it saved me so much time. It allowed me to skip the line edit, which is one of the more expensive edits on my novel. And I reached out to them and asked if I could show you guys their platform. And they were like, sure, because AutoCrit's just great like that. And then I went on to work for them as a developmental editor. So I just want to be completely straight and upfront that just like all of my other videos, this one will be an honest, open review. And most of the information you're going to see here is information based on my experience as a user of AutoCrit who has purchased a lifetime membership with them before they ever hired me. So I'm excited just to show you the site. So let's pull it up. And while I'm pulling it up, I just want to show you a little bit about what AutoCrit is and what it does. I'm sure you may have heard of self-editing software like Grammarly and ProWritingAid. And I have used most of those as an indie author. I don't have any shade to throw for any of those. However, I like AutoCrit because while it's still an editor for typos and grammar, it allows you to compare your book to other books and genres in general. It's genre specific. So you can say compared to other current fantasy books on the market, in my case. Your book has more or less showing versus telling. Your book has more or less adverbs. And it was really helpful just making sure that it met the expectations my readers were going to have before I put the book out for the world. And that to me was a great value add. So I'm going to share my screen so that you can see everything. Here we go. What I'm going to share with you today is a preview of AutoCrit Pro because, as I said, I have a Pro membership with them. But there is also a free membership. So here's AutoCrit's website. It's been featured on BBC and Simon & Schuster and all these other things, which is great. They're very transparent. The pricing and everything is very transparent. You can go to plans and pricing. There is a free forever membership, and then they have professional memberships, and those charge either $30 a month or $2.97 a year. And I started on the $30 a month plan when I first got AutoCrit because I wanted all the extra reports. All the key reports that you sort of want are included in free, but there's some I'm going to show you today that I really loved in Pro. And it has been well worth the money as it saved me $1,600 on my line edit. I can't recommend it highly enough just as a user. But there is a free forever membership, no strings attached. And when I used it the first time, I got the Pro monthly and edited a book and decided, you know what, I'm not going to write for a while. I'm not going to do anything for a while. And I left, and they didn't give me a hard time at all And I came back about a year later and used it for a few months, and then as soon as I got the chance, I cashed in on the lifetime when it became available, because those are rare, and I wouldn't change anything about it. So yeah, but AutoCrit is a online based editing tool that compares your work to other works in the genre currently, and it also has some of the key editing services that you'll need, like typos and grammar too. They also have an author services team, of which I'm a part. The developmental editing falls under their story inspections and their first chapter critiques, but they also have help with story doctors. They have one-to-one coaches, pitch appraisals if you're going to do traditional publishing, and they have courses, and the genres vary. So right now they're doing fantasy and horror, but I've seen them do other courses as well. And there's a huge writer community within AutoCrit called Mighty Networks, and the community is the key piece of what keeps me with AutoCrit as a writer, and why I still use it to edit my current books, because the community is invaluable. Writing can be really lonely, but it doesn't have to be. So now that I've shown you just sort of the overview of the sign-in before you look at the reports, I want to say, if you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to drop them in the chat. I will answer them as they come up. I'll be checking back from time to time. Once you sign into AutoCrit, which again is an online-based platform, this is not an app you download to your computer, which means you can access it anywhere. You can pull it up on any desktop and still have access to your work. You will be brought to the homepage, which is what this is here. I'm going to stop for just a second and show you within settings. There is an option for different forms of English for your spelling and grammar check, which I really, really like. And it's as easy as clicking the settings button. They have South African English, American English, Australian English, British English, Canadian English, and New Zealand English. I've seen other platforms that have one or two of these, but I love that as an editor, because I was, again, an editor before I came to work for AutoCrit. As an editor, I could plug a piece into here if I needed to and check it against, is this spelled the same way? Little differences, like neighbor being spelled with a U or not, depending on the type of English. And it was just really, really helpful. So you can select that. And there's also a read aloud option within AutoCrit if you want to have something read to you because it's just not looking right on the page and you want to hear how it sounds. You can select voices from here and test them out. You can be reminded to save your work if you're like me and you're like, oh, I never remember to save my work. So you can just set that to yes. Or you can change it to no if you are good at saving, because you want to save between your reports or you're going to lose your data. So you can just set that up here. And then there's options for personal words that you don't want to keep coming up as errors. I'm a writer of epic fantasy, so I have places and people and fake made-up languages that I don't want to keep pulling up. This is misspelled, this is misspelled, this is misspelled. So I just put those here. And then character names that you want in your POV reports, you can add those to a list here. And you just click to update, add in all of your characters, and click submit. Okay, so I'm going to check back. Sorry, I got to flip over to a different screen to see if there's any questions as I go through. Now that we've shown you the setup and all the different forms of English that AutoCrit can edit, which is a really helpful tool, let's jump right in. I went ahead and loaded Downfall's The King, which is my most recent novella, and I'm actually doing some touch-up work on it right now because there were some crafty typos that a proofreader found. It's just a good way to say AutoCrit is an excellent tool, but it is not meant to replace a human editor, which is why people like me work with AutoCrit. If you need a editor, you can go to the AutoCrit community and ask, hey, do you have recommendations for a reputable copy editor or proofreader or something like that too. But it's meant to help cut down the work needed, because as an editor we charge based on word count and we charge based on how much time it's going to take us to edit your book. And AutoCrit as I said earlier, saved me $1,600 on my first book because the lady I had contracted for a line edit, when I finished self-editing with AutoCrit, was like, you don't even need the line edit. And then I was able to just skip her and go straight to my copy editor. And that more than paid for my AutoCrit membership. I was extremely thankful, but it was thanks to all the errors that were caught here. So once you load your document in, you'll have access to the summary report. Even if you have the free account, you'll have access to this. And I want to talk about this because this is what has made my editing so much better. I am one of those people that loads my report in, or my book in, and I run the summary report first to see where are my pain points. The scorecard shows you 90.3 right here, 90.03. This is based on whoever I put up here and compared to your text. Now, if you're a free user, you have access to compare your text to nonfiction or to fiction. But if you are a pro member, that's that $30 a month pro member, you can pick specific authors and specific genres within those buckets. And I'll show you some of those once we look over this report. But I have a 90.3, which sounds good, but that is in comparison to how well my book lines up with the other books within fantasy in the market right now. That is not, your book is perfect and doesn't have typos. Even if you got 100, it does not mean your book is error-free. This is comparing how your book would be received, basically, is the way I like to look at it by other readers in the genre. So this should not be your goal. I've got to get to 100, because if that's the case, chances are your book is going to sound like so many other books. You want to keep originality. And if you watch any of our What's the Score videos that AutoCrit has done, you'll see that the majority of authors score in the low to mid 80s, some in the high 70s, and that's fine. So the point is not to get 100. The point is to use the reports to both edit your book and help it fit better into its genre. Every single book has its own unique fingerprint. This fingerprint changes. These are the focal points of your book. The highest numbers are the ones you need to focus on first. So I have 1,013 different points that were noted within strong writing for Down Falls the King. That's going to be the first place that I'd want to look to see what I could improve. Followed by repetition, followed by word choice. And then honestly, I didn't do half bad in pacing and dialogue. But every book that I've ever done, and I've now loaded like 6 books through AutoCrit, has had a totally different set of things in this thumbprint that I need to look at. And that means that, yay, I'm improving in some of those areas. So it also helps you get better as a author. If you scroll down, it will tell you the number of words that are in what you uploaded. Down Falls the King is a novella. It was 16,967 words. Number of uncommon words, number of complex words, and the reading level, which most people recommend 4th to 5th grade reading level for most adult books. So mine's a little bit higher, and it could be because of the Japanese words throughout and some other words, but you can actually run any of these reports here to see what exactly is on them. Sentence analysis, paragraph analysis. For both of these, you want shorter sentences, shorter paragraphs, but you'd like to see a waterfall, which is what we've got here. The reverse waterfall, with the short being the biggest categories and the long sentences being very rare. Long paragraphs being very rare because run-on sentences lose readers' attention. Run-on paragraphs lose attention. And you can see in the pacing reports within AutoCrit where those are and decide whether you want to break those up or not. Then scrolling down further, these gauges are where I come to check for my key essential points of writing fantasy. That is adverbs, generic descriptions, showing versus telling, and filler words. None of these were in my thumbprint. But compared to the average fantasy that has been uploaded for comparison, I've got between good and great on the number of adverbs I have. When I first uploaded The Vow That Twisted Fate, the adverbs were running away from me, and I was like over here in the orange, too many. way too many adverbs. Those are your ly adverbs. And the really great thing about AutoCrit is it has a thesaurus over here. So I would highlight the adverb, click the thesaurus, and it would say, here's all the other words you can use that are not adverbs. And it was great. I loved it. And some of them I got to just slightly tweak and take out altogether, which falls into the line editing. Generic descriptions, something's good, something's delicious, something's nice. I got to narrow those down. What was good? Was it good and was it salty? Was it savory? Was it spicy? What color was it? Why was it nice? Was it soft and fluffy? You just learn to improve your craft that way, really. Showing versus telling is another one that I struggled with in my first book that has improved since I've started using AutoCrit as a user. And showing versus telling is when you tell a reader something and instead of letting them infer it by experiencing it. For example, he could tell from her face that she was angry. That is a classic telling sentence. Instead of telling, you could show the reader that by saying her brow furrowed, her cheeks flushed red. He could see her chest rising and falling, heavier and faster, and then you never have to say that she's angry. The reader is gathering the scowl, the furrowed brow, the red face, clenched fists, gives us the impression she's angry without ever having to say it. And then filler words, those are unnecessary words like that, and seems, tries to blah, blah, blah. Well, did she or did she not? Let's do a little Yoda here. Not she tried to, especially past tense, because the narrator is just telling us what they did. So unless she's literally trying something and it doesn't work, like she tried to open the door and it didn't open. Otherwise, if you have a sentence where it's like, she tried to stand up and then she walked out the door. Well, obviously she just stood up. So you can just take that try right out and just switch it to stood up. And while we're on all of this, I did want to point out, you might be thinking, why would an editor use an editing tool? And why would an editor not catch their own mistakes without using an editing tool? There's a term in the editing industry called page blindness. And that is where your brain autocorrects errors from simple typos to complete sentences that are missing or half written, or descriptions that you have in your head that your brain auto-fills and you don't think about it, so you don't catch it. And then when it gets out to the readers catch it. And it makes it really hard to edit your own work effectively. So tools like AutoCrit are helpful, but that is also why I do personally also have real-life human editors to go with AutoCrit. AutoCrit cuts down how much work they do and therefore how much they have to charge me for that work, but I still have to have them because they are going to pick up things that I wouldn't catch, just like I as an editor will catch errors that other people might miss in their own book. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting data in this summary report. And for the sake of time, and because this is mostly to show how to self-edit, I won't go through all of it, but you'll find repetition information on here, your patterns for sentences, like in this case, how many sentences start with initial pronouns or names instead of other things, how many cliches you have. 5.59% are cliched sentences. And what's a cliche? A cliche is, I love you, I know. You know, just things that are done a lot, which could be good in dialogue, but if you're using it in narrative, you might want to trim those out or cut them down. You can see which words you use the most and the phrases you use the most, and this is just a great place to get started. You can also compare files, so I can put my unedited draft, which is what this is, of Down Falls the King, and then I can click Compare Files and upload the new draft, and it will show side by side how my summaries have improved. I don't mind as much about this scorecard over here being where it needs to be as I do these gauges being above average or right around average, and then my thumbprint. Having 1,000 things that popped up in strong writing is something that I'm like, okay, I need to focus on that right away. And then to show you, comparisons, here is what you can compare your text to once you get the Pro. There's nonfiction narrative, nonfiction prescriptive, general fiction, biographies, memoirs, academic, and you can also do specific authors. So I can say Beverly Jenkins, Brandon Sanderson, Dan Simmons, there's Dean Koontz. There's so many people on here. So if you have a writer and you are writing and you know you want to not copy their work, but sound like more their style. For example, I'm a huge Tolkien fan, but Tolkien does not write anything like some of the current authors coming out in epic fantasy. So I could go through and pick a current author from fantasy and say, okay, I want to make sure that as much as I love Tolkien, that my style matches more Brandon Sanderson. And then I could click on that and all my reports would change, not because they are errors that they're pointing out, but because they're pointing out what matches up with what he does. He uses more or less adverbs than what I've used, or he shows versus tells more than I do, and things like that. It's just really helpful. And the nonfiction, again, is on here as well if you're a nonfiction author. So here is Down Falls the King. I'm going to check back over for questions, so you guys feel free to drop them. I know we have some people viewing. Here is Down Falls the King. If you're new to the site and have never used it before, to get used to navigating in AutoCrit, I really recommend pulling the grammar report first after you see your summary. This is, again, based on whichever type of English you wanted to set in your settings, the American, New Zealand, South African, UK. It will pull up all of what it shows as a spelling error or other. What I love about AutoCrit is that you remain in creative control of everything. So you could go through and say, spelling. Okay, this is not a spelling error. I actually have these little dashes after the beginning of an end because it's a formatting note for my formatter, that there are symbols and fonts that I want in certain places. But other things I can go over, hover over Gothic, and it recommends that you capitalize Gothic. If you don't want to capitalize it, you can just leave it as is and click the over arrow and skip on down to the next thing. So all of these little symbols are formatting symbols. We're going to miss those. Here we go. Quincentenary. This is a made-up word that I have for this book, so I could add it to my exemption report if I don't want it to show up, or I can just skip over it. Some of the words, like tengu, which is a Japanese word, I have already added to that report. So even though my browser, my web browser, is saying it's misspelled, it's not misspelled. That's how it's supposed to be spelled. And AutoCrit won't flag it because I've already noted it as an exception. I have oomph on here. And it says, okay, replace this to oomph. And it's as easy as just scrolling through like that and going through. Tartarus, not misspelled. I just didn't add it to the list. Edda, should it be capitalized or not? So overall, I didn't have a whole lot of errors typo-wise here, but unscrubbed, unflushed, it gives you suggestions. You don't have to take all of them, or you can. And then there's grammatical errors that it will pop up on here, suggestions. So it says here, before at the beginning of the sentence usually requires a second clause. This one has a second clause, but there's usually a comma, so it will just mark it as a suggestion for you to consider. When her prying eyes, same thing, but it will also catch commas and things like that. So this comma is probably incorrect. His life, and you can go through and decide. I've already actually corrected a lot of the spelling and grammar. Here it says there's an unnecessary space. You have a white space, so I can just say remove, correct highlighting, or I can come in here and delete the white space. And you can edit it all here. Just remember to save it in the file when you're done. And whenever you're ready to download it, you could just go over here to export, and you can export your files in a variety of different formats. You can have it set to come out in Times New Roman, Arial, Courier, or Calibri in different indentions and things, and it will come out as either rich text, or docx, Word. I would not recommend formatting your book until after you've completely finished your technical edits. And if you don't know what a technical edit is, that is grammar, typo, spelling, rewriting. Content edits, developmental edits, which is what I do for AutoCrit, is plot holes, character development, world building, pacing, and things like that. So if you're looking for a content level edit that still needs to be done by a person, either a developmental editor or beta reader, and I would do that first, and then do my revision, and then come in AutoCrit and self-edit. And once you're done with that, export it, and then get it ready for your human editor, ideally, if you're like me, and send it to your copy editor, send it to your proofreader, and after they're done, then it goes to the formatter. That's my suggestion, just as a user. Because if you format it before and you put it in here, you are going to lose a lot of your formatting when you export it back out. But even if you didn't, you would have to adjust all of it, because you are probably going to have more changes than you think you'll have. With Val, I caught over 3,000 spelling and grammatical errors that my other spell checkers did not catch when I put it into AutoCrit. So I'm sure my editor was thankful that it caught 3,000, but it also helped me be a better writer. There are other reports that are included as part of the free membership, the free forever membership. So under strong writing, adverbs is a free report. You can click on adverbs and it will pull up, here we go. It'll pull up, okay, compared to other fantasy books of this length, because this varies by length, I have about 11 more adverbs that are 11 more barelys than would be used. And it goes down by word. So I could go through, find barely, whose face I have barely glimpsed. I can highlight it, click the thesaurus, and it will say anything from synonyms on down. I can just scroll down. I can look for other adverbs, or okay, so barely, I have hardly. I've hardly glimpsed in the past 500 years. And then that will shift it up, because hardly, I don't think, is on my list of words, because for some reason I just don't think to use it. So then that takes one off. So then I go down to the next barely, which is on the exact same page. And some of them I'll leave. Barely missing me. I like that one. I'm going to skip it. And then again, just the very next page. Barely old enough. So it helps me know, can I switch this up and keep it from being as repetitive? These other reports that you see here are not included in free, but they are included in pro. And the one that I absolutely love is showing versus telling and unnecessary filler words. Showing versus telling will pull out things like a certain smell, a smell. What kind of smell? In this case, I've gone in and added metallic in front of it, a unique metallic smell instead of just a unique smell like I'd originally written it. What you see, what you do, the things it's highlighting is, here is this word. What else can you add to it to make it more immersive and to show the reader this? Instead of the unmistakable smell clouds my senses, I was able to go in and say the unmistakable smell of blood clouds my senses. So that's the point in showing versus telling. It pulls out, here's these words. Are you describing around it enough to paint a clear picture for the reader? I see some comments. Hey, Leah, what if your novel crosses multiple genres? Is it helpful to compare it with more than one genre, or does it matter? So I like using the big buckets. The one I'm editing right now, which is, let me take that comment off. There we go. The one that I'm doing right now is a dark paranormal romance, fantasy romance, and it doesn't quite fall into the genre standards of a romance, but it also doesn't fall just straight into fantasy. I'm editing it under fantasy because fantasy is the overall genre, but if there's a specific author, you could try that, like Anne Rice, which I've played around with. You could pick that author to compare your book to if you know that they also do genre mashups. And I have personally run books like Vow through 2 different people before and just looked for overarching things that were the same in both. So that's a really good question. It's up to you. You can choose to put it in the bigger bucket, which is fantasy, or you can choose to put it in 2, fantasy and romance, fantasy and thriller, fantasy and mystery. For example, mystery and horror go together a lot. Thriller and horror, excuse me. But you don't have to as well. And then there's always general fiction. If you don't know where your genre is, and you're like, I don't know what this is, I know it's fiction, or I know it's nonfiction, don't forget that there's the same general fiction and general nonfiction genres that you can drop your book into, and it'll just say, as a whole, in fiction, this is done more or less. That's really important for things like colons, which is seen in nonfiction, but not really seen that much in regular fiction, things like that. Let's see, AutoCrit sounds really helpful. It was super helpful. In the description, the link that's supposed to lead to AutoCrit takes you to Canva. Oh no, I'm so sorry about that. Okay, let me drop this in the chat, and then once we go off the live, I will update the description to show the link to AutoCrit. But there it is, www.autocrit.com, and an automated editing program sounds convenient. It's really convenient. There's a lot of options, but really the genre comparisons are what make this one stand out. And I also appreciated the fact that once I had run mine through all my other spell checkers, it found 3,000 errors that had not been found. It's always nice, right? So anyway, showing versus telling is one of the ones that I really love. Unnecessary filler words is another pro report that I have worn out a lot. This report, I have already weeded through them, but it shows you here's how many filler words you use. Just is one of my problem words. Ugh. Just do this, just do that, and just in front of blah, blah, blah. The just can be taken out here technically. The spear drives home deep into the earth in front of their leader, or right in front of their leader's feet, or something like that. I don't have to have just, but that's a personal style preference of mine, and I've chosen to leave it anyway, because I still have within enough to be average, as you see here. And that's what I mean by AutoCrit doesn't take away your creative choice. It just enhances. Like, hey, you've used just 25 times as a filler word. Did you want to do that? And if not, you can click on that word and it will take you through all of them. Because maybe I like using just, but I don't want to use it 3 times on the same page. So maybe I should use that thesaurus and shift them around. Redundancies in strong writing is another report that I've used a lot. You can click over here. This catches potential words that you either duplicated back to back, like 2 on 2s, or sentences that you accidentally duplicated. And that's been really, really helpful. So stand up to the harpy is on here. The other one is missing because I've already taken it off. So yeah, there's strong writing, there's pacing, which we've talked about, where you can show your paragraphs and your sentence lengths and say, oh, that is. The ones that worry me are the super long ones. This is a paragraph that's really, really long. A paragraph, this is my thing as a developmental editor, bonus point. Every time your sentence shifts a purpose from an action to a description, from a person talking to an action, something describing the scene or describing a person to describing something being done or something being said, it should be a new sentence. And every time the point of your paragraph shifts, it should be a new paragraph, ideally. So in the first half of this paragraph, it's talking about Nadius and the smell of the place that they're in, and then it shifts to Ray and what she does voluntarily and involuntarily. Her stomach clenches, and she clenches her jaw, and there have been too many times, blah, blah, blah. Well, this sentence, okay, or paragraph. It's a long paragraph, but that's okay. It all flows into the description of where she is. You can scroll through and see some of the others. Like here, this one I will split because it starts off talking about her and what she's done and describing that, and then it switches to describe what they look like. So when the purpose shifts from talking about what she's doing to what these harpies look like, I'm going to take their looks paragraph and make it its own paragraph. And then I've split up some of that. You don't need a lot of super short paragraphs. You want variation, that reverse waterfall, because it breaks up the page for the reader. If it's a lot of short paragraphs, then it's a super fast-paced setup, but it does not necessarily mean a natural read. You also don't want block after block after block of super big paragraphs. So the point is to vary them out and make it easier for the reader so that they're not information logged. Then you can also check sentence in here if you don't want to just look at your paragraphs and say, okay, why do I have sentences that are 40 words long? With the exception of bookend dialogue, which is what this is, where I've got a quote and then I have something in between and then I have a second quote. I should not have super long sentences that are 40 words long. It's just a lot. So you can click on 40 and scroll down and it will show, okay, here's a sentence that's 29 words long. Here's a sentence that's 27 words long. And just see which ones you want to keep. So stopping to hover above them, I take in the unsettling sight of a trio of human maidens no older than 20 years at most. Can I split this here and change it to they hang suspended in the air at the borders of the campfire to make it an easier read? Am I asking the reader to keep up with too many details, talking about her hovering, which is setting a picture of her hovering, her seeing the trio of human maidens, how old they are, and then continuing on in that sentence? These are all creative decisions that AutoCrit just helps me make more informed, I guess. And yay, the link works. I'm so glad it works. So yeah, we've got spelling and grammar that's free. We have the adverb report that's free. Some of these other reports are included in Pro, but since Pro is billed monthly, you can use it for however long you need and come back to us anytime. Or you can do annual and save yourself a month's worth and just, yeah, it's great. If you have issues with dialogue, there's dialogue tag reports, said and asked and things like that. The other thing that I want to point out that is big for readers, especially, or writers, especially of fantasy, is tenses. The tense report. Down Falls the King is a first-person, present tense book. And if you switch back and forth between tenses a lot, like some of your books are third-person past tense and some of them are present tense, you can go through this report and it will color code all the different tenses that you have, and you can make sure that if the tense is different, it's because it's in dialogue or because she's having a flashback and not because you accidentally wrote the wrong tense. Everything here should be present tense and or future tense. I shouldn't have past tense unless it's literally something that happened in the past. So silhouetted. It dawns on me in an instant how exposed Angelo and I are. silhouetted by the pale round Tengu moon. Okay, that's fine. They've already been silhouetted. That one is okay to leave in the past. But if one of these were, let's say, caught me off guard instead of catches me off guard, then that's something that I could pull out here. There's also word choice reports within AutoCrit. I won't go too much into those, but the ones that I've found really helpful are sentence starters and initial pronouns. Sentence starters are if, and, but, as. Things that don't start with a noun that is not a pronoun, or an ing starter, although AutoCrit does include ing starters on here. So standing, lowering, pulling, it just brings those. It doesn't say they're wrong, it just brings those to your attention. 13 of the sentences in my book start with the word if, and do I want them all to start with the word if, or can those be adjusted? Do I have too many that are starting with names? In this case, I. 130 sentences of my book start with the pronoun I. And can I switch that around to take that down a little bit? So if you look through this page, everything in red is a pronoun initial starter for the most part. Lucif, he, I, I've. Some of these are less than others. But yeah, we want to make sure that you don't have every single sentence starting with I do this, I do that, I do this, because then it makes the reader feel like they're being reported to instead of experiencing it. If you're writing first person, chances are you're writing first person because you want the reader to feel it and live it alongside the reader. POV consistency, we talked about first and third person. There's reports for that. This has been really helpful because I am splitting Dawn from first person to third person, and the book is pretty much written, and it's a pain. And instead of manually reading every single page and rewriting every single paragraph in Word, I've been able to pull the POV consistency report and just click. Show me all the first person things, and I'm going to go through every single one of them and change it right there in the document to third person, and I'm done. It has saved hours and hours of time. I cannot recommend it highly enough because that's what I'm doing right now. I've been working on switching that over. It doesn't mean it's going to be perfect, and I'm still going to do a check with my eyes, but it calls out all the obvious ones. You can do repeated words, where you put the word back to back, as I've already said, or repeated phrases, things that appear too close together. Maybe that's on purpose, maybe it's not. And then there's combination of overused words and readability. What are the statistics in your readability? So yeah, those are all the reports. When you're done with your report, you save it, you export it. You can re-upload it anytime. You can upload a new file, as you see here, and open old files. So if I said, okay, I'm done with Down Falls the King today, and I've saved my document, I'm just going to go here to my saves, and I'm going to say, you know what, let's take a look at Critinia, which none of you guys know anything about yet, because originally I was like, oh, well, maybe I'll pitch Critinia. Maybe not. So let me load Critinia in here, and I can switch over to Critinia and run my summary report and pick up on it instead. So that's the benefit of it being online. I didn't have to upload Critinia all over again like you just saw. I could just switch to the file I wanted to work on. When I did Vow, I don't want to upload new, I want to open. When I did Vow, I decided that my first run through I was going to upload the entire document, which I did, and went through it. But then as I went through it post developmental edit, as you can see here, I uploaded it chapter by chapter until I got done with the whole thing, and then I had it proofread, and then I put it back in here again, as you can see here, and I did it again because I'm just grammar Nazi and I want everything edited to death. But you can have several versions of the same book saved under the same file, which is really nice. So, okay, That is AutoCrit. That is how I run a report and how I edit my books in AutoCrit and then save. We do recommend, AutoCrit recommends using Google Chrome if you're going to use this online software. It doesn't work too well on Edge, and Firefox is hit or miss. Sometimes Firefox works, sometimes Firefox doesn't work. I will say that I've heard a lot the last week that Windows 11 with the update is putting like security spam blocker stuff on, and people are having to disable or allow AutoCrit as one of their safe sites to use it. So if you're a long-term AutoCrit user and you're like, I updated to 11 and now it doesn't work, that's probably why. But I love AutoCrit, and yes, I still use some of my other software in addition to it, but I plan on continuing to use AutoCrit for all of my books. And I don't just say that because I work for them as a developmental editor. If you are curious at all and you'd like to give it a try, the link is in the comments, and I will go put it up in the description afterward. You can sign up for one of those free forever memberships and give it a try, and maybe the pro if you know you want to try it out for the paid version, and come join us in the AutoCrit community. If you're viewing and you're already a pro member, you can click this link. I'll put it in here too. The AutoCrit community has special members only events year round. They're live that we do, Daniel and Gareth and I do with our members to help things like pitching, story doctors because you're having a certain hole that you want worked through, that are no charge to you, that are just extra because you're a pro member. And we love doing it. It's a lot of fun, and we have guests coming in. We've got a #1 New York Times best-selling suspense author who is going to be announced soon on social media, and she's going to be coming in to have a live QA over Zoom with just our members. So yeah, that's my little spiel for the AutoCrit side. What I loved and what got me to sign up was the community and the reporting. But again, thank you so much for being here. If you'd like to watch any of the upcoming videos about BookBub, BookFunnel, BookBrush, or how I'm trying to find balance, work-life balance as an indie author, you can do that by subscribing to my YouTube channel. I'll be doing these videos, probably a video a week, live here on YouTube, and answer any questions that you have. AutoCrit is, as I said, the only sponsored video in the series. So I am so grateful to the companies for allowing me to show their website for free. But thank you all so much. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye.